everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Steno Matters with Kristin Anderson. And with me today, we are going to talk about how captioning matters and talking about our captioning community. And with me today, I have Faye Rudkin, who is the CEO of Aid the Silent Foundation. And she will talk all about that here in just a moment when we get started. And then also we have Kim Falgiani. Kim is our captioning chair for NCRA. She's also a member of the NCRA Strong Committee and talk a little bit about that component of her volunteering. And she has done numerous times the silent one in the back of the room when we do the annual business meeting and things that are very fast when court reporters sometimes talk. So she does that in front of all of her peers, which can be very challenging and nerve-wracking. I would not want to do it. My hat's off to all of you. So with that, let's get started. And I want Faye to take it away and tell us about her story and her connection with Whitney and her life and her foundation. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. Thank you. Go take it away, Faye.
Hi, everyone. My name is Faye Rudkin. I'm here in San Antonio, Texas. And my story really began when I was just 3 years old. They started noticing that I was behind in language, speech, developmentally, and teachers in my life recommended to my parents that I possibly had hearing loss and I should go get tested. And immediately that diagnosis, that audiology booth changed my story forever. And early on in my life, just watching my parents having to navigate that world and not knowing any other deaf people. And the internet was brand new. So it wasn't like you could go and find a Facebook group with other parents who had children who were deaf. And my mom would actually go to the local library and check out books about how to raise deaf children and deaf education. And really what they were able to do. Sorry, that's Hank. His bone got stuck.
Uh-oh.
No, he may need help. Hank,
Okay.
come here. Sorry, he got a bone stuck in his throat.
Oh, no.
Yeah, okay. Let me think what I was. So really, it was brand new, the internet, and being able to find communities and other parents who had deaf children. So my mom would go to the local library, check out books about deaf education and how to raise deaf children. And really at this time, it was becoming more known that there wasn't just ASL, American Sign Language, but there was also listening in the spoken language. So kind of just by default and what they knew at the time, they decided to go more listening and spoken language, but hearing aids and speech. And immediately I was put into speech therapy, immediately put into hearing aids. And I'm actually from a small town outside of San Antonio that's called Boney. And in Boney was the only deaf kid that we knew of until I was about fourth grade. I knew another one. And they found a small little school and they kind of implemented the things that they were learning. And very much early on, I felt like a fish out of water, constantly keeping up with my other classmates and my peers, and always feeling behind in school, constantly having to take home the teacher's textbooks to reteach myself the day's lessons, working at so much uh, rapid speed and so much harder than a lot of my peers to understand the same information. So I had what's called your FM system, so your frequency meter that connects to your hearing aids. I also I would sit in the front of the classroom. I would get teacher's notes, but still I was coming home and spending about 3 to 4 hours a night reteaching myself school, reteaching myself the day's lessons, and that went on from first grade all the way to high school graduation. So you can imagine I struggled with being really frustrated, pretty isolated. I had one really close friend that was my note taker. So I was assigned a best friend who would sit with me and she would take notes for me, and we would meet up after school and she'd share with me her notes. And so that was my only version of like captioning ever at that point, was on the TV, seeing it on TV. But still most television shows didn't have captioning, very limited selections. And remember watching the news with my parents or sporting events and not having captioning. And
And the Faye, what year was that roughly when they were not having the captioning?
and that would have been like early 2000, late 90s.
Okay.
So just remembering, like, you didn't, not everything had captioning, but my parents were big advocates of that. You put it on, every movie we watched had to have it. We didn't go to the movie theaters unless um like we don't go to the movie theaters. My parents had a rule that if Emma can't enjoy it, we're not going. And at this point, I was had severe hearing loss, moderate severe. It became severe, profound as an adult. And just seeing them advocate for me throughout the schools. There was one year that the rugs, that the floors in the classroom were so echoey and the acoustics were so bad that my mom went and actually bought rugs for the classroom. And it was a small private school, so there was no such thing as having your special education or teacher of the deaf. It was pretty much a lone ranger in the system. And but thankfully I had a great school that really cared about me. My parents really cared. But of course you become angry and frustrated, and that I acted out in ways of feeling like um just feeling left out. I was made fun of for how I talk, for hearing aids. And so I kind of grew into this angry preteen middle school girl and really short temper, and I would pretend all day that I was okay, that I'm tough. And then the moment I would get in the car, I would start crying. So my mom would say, I just prayed every day from third grade to eighth grade that I'd pick you up and you wouldn't be crying. And so I would come home and she would say, Emma, unfortunately, you've learned that life is not fair at a very young age. And I know it's not. And you're allowed to feel sorry for yourself tonight. You're allowed to have a little pity party tonight. But tomorrow you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to keep loving people and you're going to keep showing up and you're going to keep fighting and trying hard. So that became the motto of my life. And, in eighth grade, probably the hardest year. And then that summer going into high school was the most radical summer of my life. I ended up going to a Christian camp. I signed up for this camp last minute, didn't know anybody. And that summer, just realized for the first time that deafness and my story was going to be used to help other people, that there was such a purpose behind this, like all of the pain and just loneliness that I felt until that point was going to be used to help other people. And so all of a sudden, my pain had purpose. And that was a huge perspective shift. But when I came back to school, when I came home to my family, my attitude and my outlook was completely different. I had joy and I was patient with people and I became really soft and loving. And everybody noticed in my life that I was approachable and kind. And to that, because of these changes in me, I started dreaming really big stuff, dreaming big dreams of what does this look like as a deaf person, had I accomplished these goals. And a lot of it was people had told me all of my life I couldn't do something, I couldn't try out for cheerleading, I couldn't stay on beat, I couldn't do acting, I couldn't play instruments. And so I went down that list and just each thing was like, I'm gonna conquer this, I'm gonna do this. And that grew in confidence of, well, let's learn to play the piano. So I learned to play the piano through vibrations. That led into, well, if I can learn the piano, let's play the guitar. If I can do that, let's figure out how to sing. Let's try out for the school plays. Let's be on the cheer team. And so that confidence grew, and eventually it grew into this meeting with my family. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Aid the Silent comes from kind of a family background of my father is a attorney, he's an ad litem attorney. So I grew up hearing about court reporters all of my life and, we're friends with a lot of them because of what he does. And so he's an ad litem attorney for children who were deaf a lot of times because the judges would know I had a deaf child, that he was familiar with this world. So he would come home with stories about deaf children. And one child in particular, it was just a light bulb moment of, because I was born to the parents that I have, my life looks different. The access to resources is incredible. But this young man had nobody fighting for him. And the system had completely failed him. And he was due all of these resources and all of this support, and none of it was happening. And so we looked at this child and just realized like he needs all of these things. He needs an advocate and education and resources, and he needs to hear about you know sorry, my neighbors are having a party right at this moment. Um so he needed all of these resources. He also needed to know that he was wonderfully made with great purpose, that there was purpose for his life. And so we sat down and started brainstorming about this nonprofit. And of course, I'm throwing out all these ideas that it should be these four things. It should help with research, resources like hearing aids, speech, sign language, send kids to camp, and help teachers of the deaf because there was no funding. And my mom at first was like, hey, that's too many things. Like, you need to nail it down, pick a lane. And I just felt like, no, like it's going to be all of these things. It just will. And I wrote down different names of what I could call it. And this is about 16 years old when this happened. Started writing down different names. And at first I had Aiding San Antonio. Aiding San Antonio. And I felt like God was just like, that's too small. Like let me show up and do something bigger. And so that became Aid the Silent. And I wrote the name down. I asked my mom if she would help me buy the website name. So I owned the name aidthesilent.com since 16. But I'm still coming into like, what am I gonna do in my life? And once I got to college, that's where captioning comes into play for me. If you all want me to start talking about captioning as well, this is kind of when things change. So
Yeah,
I
that would
get
be
to
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when I got to the University of Texas at San Antonio, I'm still not quite sure what I'm gonna do. I own this domain name. I played instruments. Still didn't know what my purpose was. And I'm hoping, something meaningful, like a nonprofit or working with children. Still didn't know. But when I first show up to UTSA, they, of course, were like, you have to meet with the Disabilities Services Office at the university. And I did not want to be considered that. I didn't want to be in the disabilities office. I was very stubborn. And eventually someone was just like, just go meet with them. So I go to this meeting and they were like, okay, we think you would benefit from quote, from captioning. What do you quote services? I think there's no way. I've fought all of my life to not need help, to not need these resources, to not need accommodation. Like I'm fine. Like I worked so hard. I was doing so much work to try to stay even remotely with my peers, And I believed a terrible lie all of my life that I wasn't smart enough, that wasn't a good student, that I couldn't do it. So I show up to that meeting and kind of meet some of the people that did call it at the university. And they just convinced me, try it for 1 week, just 1 week. And that first week, I remember my listening fatigue was so much less that I understood like word for word what was happening. I could take home the notes from the transcription in class. I became great friends with my captionist, and I told them like I would never go a day without this. This is so life-changing for me. And realizing for the first time I was a good student. I didn't know that. I didn't know I was good at school, but I finally had equal access. I was on equal playing field with my peers, and I had spent so many years working so much harder to keep up. And all of a sudden, I just had access to the information right in front of me in real time. And so just realizing I was a good student, and that really built confidence in my life. And during that time, I decided to go for Miss San Antonio. And I just felt very strongly that through the Miss America organization, you had to have a platform. You had to be associated with some sort of school program or a nonprofit. I felt strongly that, okay, I'm supposed to stay able silent. And if I win Miss San Antonio, that's the launching pad. That's just going to kick it off. And that's exactly what ended up happening a few months later. And A the Silent quickly became known on an international level because of social media, because of my story of being a deaf person who won that title. And so I ended up doing Miss San Antonio twice. The talent was top 5 at Miss Texas. And of course, at the end of my university, um, I ended up being top 5 honors college at the UTSA. And I say it's because of captioning. I really didn't know that I was a good student, that I was able to keep up. And because I finally had an equal playing field, I went from being the worst student to being the top 5 in my graduating class at the university. So it was such a success story because of captioning.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's such an emotional story. It's just so great to hear. I love hearing that. And I can attest to seeing what she's accomplished because I met Emma Faye probably I think it was about 2016 and she came to speak at the Bear County Court Reporters Association at our golf tournament and I know she has a gala every year for Aid the Silent. They do fundraising and so I really would everybody should take having your why is such an important thing. We talk to court reporters and captioners about that in our association. And so it's so great to hear Emma's why of why her pain was going to have a purpose. And so it was such an incredible journey. I think, Kim, did you want to jump in and ask any questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. First, Emma Faye, that's such a wonderful story. Congratulations on everything you overcame. I like the words you use. I like to use the buzzwords equal access or equal communication when I deal with clients. I thank them for providing communication access are the words I like to use. And that's something you said, you had equal access for the first time. And that's what CARD is meant to provide: communication, access, real-time transcription. So I'm glad that changed your lives. Did you ever have an issue with your disability office not wanting to provide you equal access?
I would say I was very fortunate to have a wonderful disabilities office now because of what I do with Aid the Silent and advocating for resources. And we do work with mainly teenagers who are going into colleges. That's not the case. Mainly it is that they're having to fight the disabilities officers at the universities to get credit in real time, to get real-time captioning. And I fortunately had a good group of captionists at my university, but I know that's not the case. So my captionists were students that were trained on a program and all of that. And then when I met Whitney from Caption Source, who is the vendor that we use at Aid the Silent locally, that was a pretty big difference to see a real captionist versus a student who is trained. That's a significant difference.
That's an important point to any students who may listen to this in the future. Many students think that they can provide CART because it's quicker than getting into a courtroom, but I don't think they understand that the consumer, people like Emma Faye here, deserve better. they deserve accurate captioning. And this, a lot of students think that, oh, I can do 180 words a minute, I can go do CART. And it's refreshing to hear an actual consumer say that there's a big difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference. And especially, I mean, thankfully, the route that I was studying wasn't medicine or science. But if you're in those type of classes, I had a friend that was a going into med school who's now a doctor, and she could not get caught. And it was, I mean, it's one of the largest medical schools that you can think of. And she just fought the whole time. And it's such a shame because I'm like, we need doctors who have hearing loss. We need these incredible, smart people to have access to their education because we need them in the workforce.
Right.
I don't think people understand that.
Do you have you noticed the difference with the implementation of auto captions or artificial intelligence? Do you have an opinion of a live person like Whitney versus being forced to use artificial intelligence as a access?
Yes. So if I'm in a bind, I'm meeting face to face, I have one app that works, kind of, not perfect. But if I'm just like, okay, I need something for this meeting. However, what happens is if I'm at a luncheon, if there's audio, if there's mics and different speakers, nothing is picking it up correctly. And especially because it's a computer, it's not perfect. And that's extremely frustrating if somebody says, hey, you went, because what happens to me is I get invited to these events to be a speaker and a guest on accessibility, and they forget to provide it for me. And there's massive corporation. And so I would recommend, like, let's do captioning and all of this, but I'm in a cough. And my computer, I need to charge it. I'm so sorry. Can I be right back to charge it?
Okay, sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure. You're fine.
I thought it was fully charged, but it's almost dead. So let me get it.
No problem. Take a moment. So Kim, do you want to share anything about what the captioning committee has been working on this year and any thoughts or needs that you want to express to anybody out there?
Well, I think we need, I think it's interesting for her to talk about the communication access and what a difference it made in her life. With the loss of live captioners and broadcast, I would think that directly affects people like her for access, equal access. I like that term. But I was saying, Emma, I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about equal access because so many of the television stations have gone to artificial intelligence, and they keep saying that within a couple of years. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not the same.
Not
news. Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that? Or do you want to ask it?
Sure. Lately, many of the television stations have gone directly to automatic speech recognition or artificial intelligence for broadcast. Is that something that you've noticed in your life? And if you had a preference, would you use a live human over the automatic speech recognition and the artificial intelligence, which they claim will keep getting better in the years to come?
Yes, so immediately when our local station switched over to AI, we all noticed, the deaf community noticed, and it is not the same quality. And honestly, I think it's a liability if it's breaking news, if it's against someone's rights, and it's also dangerous. I think especially if you're being up to date on what's happening in the community and weather, especially. I think it's important that it's a real person on the news, because it is concerning to see that it's not accurate, it's not getting accurate information, it's missing a bunch. And we can see on like sporting events even, it's just so behind at trying to constantly catch up. And especially like local news, it's very important that it's accurate.
Right. We as captioners, stenographers, want to educate the public on how to make complaints to the FCC. With your program, have you ever advocated for the deaf or hard of hearing communities to actually go to the FCC and file complaints about broadcast?
It's been a while, but it's something that I probably need to remember how to do. Because I feel like it does come up, and then we work with like video relay services as well. That does do the FCC, and then I serve on Governor Abbott's Committee on People with Disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue of captioning comes up a lot with educational materials, is that they're making a lot of new materials and learning, and it's not captioned.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's something that my community needs to learn how to do, is file a complaint.
I actually have some links, Chris. I have everyone's email. I can actually file or send you the FCC link if you would be so kind, maybe to put it on your website or put it out into the community. The FCC claims that the more people that complain, that they'll take notice.
Mm-hmm.
As stenographers and captioners, we feel like they don't listen to us because we have somewhat of a stake to complain about it. So we were hoping that we could get some associations to start advocating for quality and perhaps get the humans back. But we did that somewhat on our committee with National Court Reporters Association Strong Committee, advocating against automatic speech recognition and artificial intelligence. And we feel that we can talk about it for so long, and we need the associations to help us advocate and get the word out that you don't feel it's equal access. You know, you're entitled to equal communication access, yet they're making you use things like artificial intelligence. Right, exactly. Yet they're making you use artificial intelligence.
Technology's not there yet. It's not there yet. And if they say it's coming, I'm like, okay, but we've been saying it for a few years and it's still not perfect. I mean, I much rather prefer in person than some of these apps that can't keep up with what's happening. So it makes a huge difference professionally for me, because if I'm needing particular information on a time and a place, or maybe a donation or a kid's case history, like I was invited to a meeting for a child yesterday, very important. And there was no captioning for me. It was automatic through a platform. I'm missing critical information. I know this child had no idea what's happening, you know. So it just, that kind of stuff happens quite a bit.
Do you feel that it's a monetary thing, or that it's just the bigger companies find a way to make a buck by taking the human out of it? I think you answer that. You don't think the quality really suffers when you get away from the human?
Yeah, I think the quality suffers when you get away from a real person. Yeah.
Right.
And I think people are afraid of the cost at first, but especially if I'm weighing out, okay, let's say the state is paying for a young adult's college tuition, and then that cost for taxpayers versus adding in court fees. So you'd be willing to waste that resource of them getting the tuition waived, and it's paid for through the state by taxpayers for a degree or more, and to add court into that for them to potentially fail and misuse that tuition waiver, it makes more sense to utilize resources on the front end of things. And honestly, especially with education and higher education, it's important because if they don't find that personal success, so they don't have access to employment or education, they're going to cost taxpayers $1.2 million in a lifetime in benefits and governmental benefits. So it's really pay me now or pay for someone's entire life later. Provide equal access now versus playing catch up their entire lives.
I know you had a really good experience with your disability office, but do you have, outside of your college experience, do you have people that try to tell you you need to use sign language versus written words, written communication? Do they have an understanding that there's a difference in culture and understanding of captions versus sign language?
Yes, so a lot of that is educating people. I started signing later in life, so now I'm at the point in both sign language and written English. I can kind of go back and forth pretty easily. But I remember in college that coming up, oh, you're going to that event, we'll just provide an interpreter. And we work with children ages both to high school graduation. And hearing loss is a spectrum of different communication.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have kids who can sign, but they prefer captioning. We'll have kids who only prefer interpreting. We'll have kids that have no idea how to sign. And especially what's happening now with deaf education, you're finding a lot more young people are more English. Their reading comprehension is becoming better. And even in certain classes, if you're in a certain science class, to fingerspell tons of terminology, to fingerspell or come up with signs and name signs, if possible. But most likely someone who's in that class needs actual written word, medical terminology or science or whatever it is. They need to see it, not just know the conceptual of it. Because sign language is concept for concept, not word for word. So it sets us apart at A the Silent. We'll do both at every event. We'll have captioning and interpreting. Because for me, I realized even kids who are deaf culture, American Sign Language, you can see their brain turning as they go, here's the sign for it, that's the English word. Because that's why deaf people who have only had maybe ASL grammar structure, they only know that other reading levels are like third grade because they know a conceptual language, not a written language. So what we found with some of our kids is they love seeing the captioning. They love seeing it next to the interpreter because they can correlate that's the English word for that sign. That's how you spell it. And so I think if we had an unlimited budget, and there could be if it was allocated correctly, I would love to see captioning and Korean and sign language next to each other because I think it helps kids know how to read.
Mm-hmm.
They start piecing it together. And then I love seeing both communities be unified. So you have maybe an older population who is very dependent on sign language. Then you have a younger group who's able to use captioning. And you see them all being unified and they're all at an event together. So a lot of what I do is I educate churches and I recommend quotes to them or American Sign Language. And part of what always happens is like immediately when I do an interpreter, and like, okay, back up. Let's look at your demographics. Let's do some research. You may not even have a deaf community here. There may not even be someone who uses sign language, but most likely you're going to have a population who's lost their hearing later in life. In San Antonio, we have a very strong veteran community. There's like 7 different bases here. So hearing loss from military is very likely. So these are people who aren't using sign language. They're going to be dependent upon captioning. And one of the fastest growing churches in America is here in San Antonio. and they have 5 services. And I was able to work with them, but they were providing live captioning for all 5 services.
Great.
And it was incredible. And people who were veterans, had lost their hearing later in life, had sickness or illness that took it. They felt isolated from church. They felt isolated from community. All of a sudden, they had that. And so a lot of what I do sometimes is I just teach a church. Let's look at what's happening. Because I go to a church in my hometown, Burning, and they kept wanting to do interpreting. And they all know sign language users. I know maybe 1 or 2, and they only go to a different church. I said, but you have people who are like me, who are listening in spoken language, little kids in the school systems here, or you have people who went deaf later in life, and they would benefit from captioning.
We hope to bring in some students maybe to take a listen to this at some point. And I think when we're talking to the students, we like to remind them that even rocket scientists lose their hearing, and that it's never good enough. You know, they deserve to hear the same thing everyone else hears. We as captioners, if you get a professional captioner, we really advocate for high accuracy, which I think you more than appreciate in your life with your CART provider. Captions that don't lag. I think you said that's very tiring for you to have to play catch up on your captions. And then environmental sounds, like if there's a phone ringing or if somebody's dropping something or a dog in the background, you would really like to have your captioner putting those parentheticals in for you. And Whitney, this one's for you, the onomatopoeias, right? And I had to throw that road out for her. Anyway, so we like to, we want our students to know that there are very intelligent people that need the written word. And it's interesting for you to hear you tell about how the ASL and the captioning together make a big difference, especially for those still learning. But I think your story is amazing, your perseverance, and really proud of Whitney for getting you through your classes and continuing on with what you do. If the captioning community could do something in working with your organization, what sort of thing would you like? What education would you like to see the captioners put out into the community that might help?
Yeah. One thing that I do with Whitney and her company is I'm constantly connecting her with the AV team. We use captioning at 7-day camps. And when we take kids to a camp, it's 5 different programming a day, 5 different big events, 5 different skit characters or songs and talks and games, and it's pretty wild. And it takes someone very organized to see what's gonna come up. And so what we do a lot is we have a way in advance, we have a all team call with camp. So we'll have the captionist, we'll have AV team at camp or the event, and we'll have all the different people involved and kind of walk them through it. And then typically I'll have a staff person that's all they're doing, is making sure the TV is set up, things are working, kind of troubleshooting beforehand. But I think that's important for captioners to work ahead of time, and to really be pushy about that for the clients of, hey, let me just go directly to your AV person ahead of time. Let's troubleshoot. Let's do a trial run beforehand. I think that's important. And I think also maybe for companies in particular, coming up with a sales model, becoming a sales person, because I feel like I'm constantly educating people on this product and teaching new clients about this. And I think when they understand the difference and when they see it, and one thing that I always do to get people to use captioning, and I tell them, because a lot of times you're working with some big personalities, maybe a speaker, a corporate company, a pastor. I was like, wow, now you have your transcriptions. You can look at your own notes. And so I always play to like a little bit of the, not ego, but like you're gonna want to reread yourself, right? And see what you said. And so they like that. And they like that they will have the transcription to put on YouTube. They can just upload that file. Um, and then also I say that point of, okay, you can either pay for it now and have a bunch of angry people at your event. Like if you don't, you're gonna have a bunch of people who are very frustrated that fall out and staff, like I have business, I'm like your staff time of dealing with this afterwards because you didn't do it in the first place. So I always try to play on like a business mindset of you're gonna do it now, so you're not wasting time later. And especially like in education, if you pay for it now, you're not gonna spend someone's entire lifetime catching them up, you know.
I did want to ask you one thing. I'm
Um,
sorry. Go ahead,
Oh, I
Kristin.
was just gonna say it's all about being proactive instead of reactive on these things. It would be wonderful
yeah,
to do that.
to be proactive.
Captioners often beg for prep materials, and you really have to stay on your event coordinators. Now, when you're working with a great group, and I'll say NCRA, always put me in touch with the AV teams. And if I've done any, say, worldwide or national groups, they're happy to put you with the AV team. There's other people that think you should show up, shut up, sit in a corner, and not even have special, audio so you can hear. Exactly. Before we go, and I want to ask you this because
and one thing that I wish, oh no, I just think I wish people knew about that platform that allowed you to overlay the text on top of a PowerPoint. It's a real easy software,
text
and
on top.
I believe so. Yes. And that annoys me at events because I'm just like, that is so easy. It's just a planning ahead of time to being proactive. And because I love to see it over the PowerPoint and over the videos if they forget to caption it. That's just something that I thought would be important.
Well, that's actually interesting to any captioner or any student to know your platform and know what your consumer prefers. You talked about music, and I wanted to ask you what you think about the captioning of music. Do you prefer to see it come up word for word live, or do you
We do
kind of,
that. Yeah,
yes,
we do that at our music events so that it's following it. And then, when you have a church event,
yeah.
it's following it. It's playing on the PowerPoint. So I wouldn't be the biggest advocate of doing that at a church, but when we do camping and we do music concerts, and I would say a general concert or an event hall, I love seeing it play word for word what's happening.
I actually do some music venues, and that's one of my favorite things to caption music. So I was glad to hear you say you enjoy the music. Sometimes it confuses people. Why are you captioning music for the deaf? And it's like they can feel it, they have some hearing, but
Understand that the lyrics and you don't know are they repeating a chorus or a bridge or and a lot of times they talk between sets and they talk between maybe certain lines, and so it's helpful to know that what's happening because I can't hear lyrics. I have to have the words. So, and one thing that I do love that is technology, because technology is great. I love on Apple now, on Apple Music, you can put the words and it traces the words for you so I can stay on. So that's a new feature on Apple Music. You can see the words in real time. So the artist has uploaded the transcription.
that's interesting, right? As opposed to the pop on or just the subtitle.
Yeah, because it used to be like you had to scroll, you had to keep scrolling, and now the Apple Music will move with the music.
It's like the old fashioned sing along, like the bouncing ball
It's,
on
it's
top of each word. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
always love when that happens.
But
So
anyway.
MFA, that you had a music festival, right? Did you do more than one or just the one?
So,
You did
yeah.
two.
And
Okay.
we'll do another one. We're in the middle of our capital campaign for a building.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of those corporate sponsors that we normally do the festival, they are part of that campaign
Okay.
instead.
Mhm.
So but we will do that. And that's the same thing. It was captioning on both screens, both LED screens. And also there was a captioning bar across the bottom. The interpreter was also on the screen. And we had light shows, vibrating packs, like backpacks that move with the music. And that was the first time I heard deaf people, like older deaf people, they were very emotional because they said that was the first time they had ever experienced music not being shoved in the corner. They were able to enjoy the music festival all over the venue grounds and could see the captioning, feel the music, see the interpreter, and they weren't confined to a corner. So that's what I say is important for music, is that you're not just in this closed off section in the dark, but you can't move around. You can't, you know, sometimes you can't even sit with your family and friends you came with, maybe just one friend. And so that's what was important to me, that you could see it occur throughout the festival grounds.
Yeah, and when you had it, I remember the first one, I think, is the one I went to, and so people came from other countries. They were so excited about that event. It was
That was
unique
all
and
from
so,
England that came.
yeah,
Yeah, because it was just the first of its kind.
yeah,
And I've seen it done well since then either. So we'll bring it back. And it
yeah,
was captioned, so it
yeah.
was good vibrations.
Yeah.
Music
Oh
fest.
yeah, yeah, that's yeah. Yeah. It was a wonderful experience, and well, you are definitely a pioneer in that realm and such a wonderful advocate for the community. And we thank you so much for being here with us today. And if anybody wants to has questions, please reach out. We can have definitely reach out to MFA and get those answers for you, but encourage you to look at her foundation, Aid the Silent, and learn more about the deaf and hard of hearing community. And it's a great way to do something else in our profession. A lot of us are in the legal realm, and I think it's a lot about our profession is when we can give back, and we know we're providing a service that's so essential to other people to have, as she mentioned, equal access. It's just it's I think it's something that's very important in your career to look back on and know that you made a difference in somebody else's life for sure. So thank you, Alma Faye, and thank you, Kim. And thank you to Whitney
Yeah.
Riley, captioner extraordinaire, who's been silent
Captioning for
and
me.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Hey, Whitney, the
It's fun.
first time I ever captioned Kristin, I want you to know she got me on that last word, which you pulled up there, extraordinaire, but
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, thank you all. And we will see you next time.
Emma, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.